7:01 p.m. and on Wednesday, February 28th, and I will call the Finance Committee meeting to order. This is Sarah Melish. I have with me in the room Tom Parkins, Dean Nahadas, Maury Creighton, Peter Twining, and Andy Oldham. Is there any member of the Finance Committee on Zoom?
Not that you can see.
And Jack Burke is online, and Ann Harrison is visiting us in person. So the first item on the agenda is the CPC projects. And I believe I forwarded to everyone the CPC spreadsheet of what was approved. So Jack is on, and Dean represents the Finance Committee on CPC. And I guess my first question is do people have questions on any of the items for which they would like additional information?
To get, if we could, a little more thumbnail of the Affordable Housing Trust and just what that is, just because it is a significantly big number.
Do you want to respond to that, Jack?
Good evening, everybody. I also have Joan McDonald, my vice chair, with me, and I'll turn that over to Joan.
I don't.
Oh, thank you, Jack. So I'm also a member of the Affordable Housing Trust. The CPC has generously been adding to our accounts for the last few years. The $200,000 is the same as it's been over the last 2 or 3 or 4 years. We've currently accumulated about $1,280,000. That's approximate in our accounts. We've spent some money. I have a breakdown if you want specific numbers, but we've spent money on consultants, architect, some law, and for town planner and town support. We're in constant, we meet monthly. The Affordable Housing Trust meets monthly. We have been discussing options on how to renovate and expand at the 3 housing authority sites, which I know you guys all know this because we've been talking about it for years. We've got a consultant at the moment, or a developer at the moment, that's has given us some indication of interest. Nobody has really stepped up right now with a plan or wants to commit to anything, but we are constantly looking for opportunities, and having money in the bank is really important because when something comes along, we'll be able to hopefully jump on it. So
I'll add to that. I represent the Finance Committee on the Affordable Housing Trust, and I think that one of the discussions we had is if we're to do a project at the public housing sites and get a developer in, that there needs to be a certain amount of money provided by the town to show interest for somebody to come in. And we were told you need 5 or 10% of the value of the development. So 1.2 million is not very high percentage of the expectation of what a development. So,
Any expectation of what that number would really need to be in the light developments that would come on? Is there any sense of how much it needs to grow over the next year?
no, I think we're still looking at that. We're using POAP to help us with ideas. I think anything done would be phased. The challenge we have is an inadequate amount of land to enable additional units. It could be market rate to help subsidize increasing the affordable units and rehabbing them. And that's some of the things that's being looked at is what other properties there that's adjacent to some of those sites. But as you know, any property in Manchester is not cheap.
Yeah.
the amount in the trust would not cover the purchase of a piece of property.
So Sarah, thanks for saying that. It is so important from what we've been told that the town, that we be able to show to a developer or to anyone that we go to for funding that the town is behind whatever it is that we get behind. So showing a constant or showing that the CPC is supporting us is really important.
And I
So
might
thank
add
you.
that this money, this additional 200,000 will bring the balance up to 1.4 million this year. Yeah.
That's right. You know, I could add also that we have made a decision to put money in CDs. We have half of our money right now at, everything's at Cape Ann, but we've got a money market checking account. So we're earning money on that. And we've got CDs that actually are going to be renewing next month. So we'll decide what to do with that. So the money is not just sitting there. We're trying to make it work.
I think it's also important to know that the funds that people have heard been paid for mortgage and rental assistance have been paid mostly with an outside donation of $150,000 and has not used too much of CPC money, if at all. Is that correct, John?
That's correct. Yep.
We spent 167,000.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
May I ask you a question about one of the other?
Yes.
What's the plan with respect to the Causeway Brook restoration? What specifically is going to be undertaken?
Yeah, this is phase 2 of funding. Originally it was noticed that by the entrance of the Memorial School, the brook in that area is filled with debris, concrete, rusty fencing, chain link fencing, and we thought, along with the Conservation Commission and the waterways, not waterways, the stream team, that this area was significant to the town and needed to be cleaned up. So we have a consultant working with the Conservation Commission. I believe she's worked with us in the past. And we've come up with a total price of around $70,000 to remove all the debris, restore it, remove invasive species, and plant native species along there. We also hope to have a collaborative with these schools, elementary and middle and high school, for educational purposes in that area, to enhance conservation efforts.
The money is needed. I share your view.
Any other questions on any of these items?
Sarah, I was just curious, have we, looking down at the, historic preservation, have we done things before that are not owned by the town? The parish church, I think, in the past.
We've spent money on the parish church steeple, I think the bells or something, and we've spent money on the Manchester Historic Museum. Is that correct, Jack?
Yes, years ago, I think we started with, before I came on, we started with the foundation of the first parish church. We've done the clock. We've done they originally had done some tower work with a big fundraising effort back in 1986, and there's more work to be done. We're paying a third of that. If you look at the sheet, the total project costs about $180,000. And they've asked us for $60,000. And the main reason we support this is not as a religion or a church, but as the first meeting house in the town of Manchester. It's a historically significant building.
That's the question.
Any questions? Andy?
No, I guess, yeah, I mean,
I'm a little uncomfortable, with the, sort of that crossover between town and a religious entity and, and putting money toward that. I do recognize that the First Parish does occupy, a prominent space in town and, but
That's an excellent question. It's something that's been vetted with the State Department of Revenue and the Attorney General's office. And as long as we are not supporting any religious efforts or artifacts in a building, it's considered an acceptable use of community preservation funds.
Anything else? Are we ready to have some motions?
I'll move that we approve the CPC funding.
Let's do it in 3 sections. The first section would be the open space and rec at the 142.70.
Seconded. There we go.
Any discussion? Take a vote. Tom,
yes.
Dean,
Yes.
Maury,
Yes.
Andy,
Yeah.
Peter,
Yes.
and Sarah votes yes. Next section would be 200,000 for community housing.
So move.
40 seconds. Any discussion? Take a vote. Tom,
Yes.
Dean,
Yes.
Maury,
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
and Sarah. Votes yes. And then the third section is historic preservation in the amount of $116,400. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Tom moves. Do I have a second?
Second.
Dean seconds. Any discussion?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm confused. And the amount again, please?
116,400. It's in the approved column.
Oh, I'm looking at the wrong column, I'll say. No, request, oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
yeah, it is kind of confusing because they also have one of existing funds to use. Okay, so I had a motion and I had a second, Dean seconded. Any discussion? No, take a vote. Tom,
Yes.
Dean,
Yes.
Maury,
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
and Sarah votes yes. So you're good.
Sarah, there are administration funds, if you'd like to
Thank you,
take a shot
yes.
at those, please.
So the fourth item is administration in the amount of 25,000.
So move.
Peter moves, do I have a second? Dean seconds. Take a vote. Andy,
Yeah.
Peter,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Dean,
Yes.
Maury,
Yes.
Sarah votes yes. So the total is 481,670, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And today's date is 2/20. Okay. Thank you, Jack and Joan.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks a lot.
The next item on the agenda is the launch service, and I believe that I sent out the proposal to everyone yesterday.
Also, hopefully came with a cover email.
Nicely done.
It was a good day.
So maybe.
You want to kick this off,
Yeah,
Peter?
could I please? So what you all asked me to do in light of this potential opportunity, we were saying about the existing launch service was to essentially develop together with Brian and Greg and with Kathy, a plan that would meet certain objectives, most important, which was self-sufficient. Meaning not relying on tax money or other monies, the possible exception for the initial purchase price that be paid back over time. One of the things we've started out, and it's important to recall, is it's a launch service. We're not talking about a touring service at this point. That was the first year of the event, the proposal for you was making a launch service. It's a launch service that has coverage, limited coverage pre and post season, and then extensive service in season. Season essentially is from the Friday before Memorial Day to Labor Day. The budget, which is on page 5 of the 6 pages, just a comment about that. The first page or so is generally about the service. The second is about the basic business plan. The 5th page is budget, and the 6th page, last page, is about maybe some future things that might happen, assuming the service is successful. So I think underlying assumptions here, besides the finance element, is that there will be one launch that is serviced. There are 2 boats potentially available here. But the second boat, which is substantially smaller, which we use for backup, at least initially. So the pricing, the labor, the costs, though 2 would be part of what we would buy, are largely based on a 1 launch service, its use, care, service, and so forth. Obviously, numbers are in there for the winter storage and so forth for 2 launches. I think the other element here is that there are some open questions, and that's why I asked that the cover memo come with it. There are some things that have not been quite resolved. One of the more notable, which has potential financial impact, would be pre and post season service of the weekend only. And how would the weekend, how would the weekdays, if they were provided, how would they be covered? I think Brian, who will speak to this probably in a moment, thinks that might be covered by existing harbor staff, as we expect the demand to be quite low. I'm not sure how practical that is, but we can talk about it in a moment. There also are some soft numbers here, and they have to do with the major repairs to keep these boats going. The larger boat is about 3 or 4 years old. The smaller boat is notably older, but been substantially refurbished in the last few years. The larger boat has been licensed to be a launch. The smaller has never been licensed to be a launch. I think the plan is, at least you can see here, is we would try to license it so it could be a legit backup, being able to carry within the licensing of the Coast Guard. So the major engine transmission issues you'll see on my email give you a rough number of what they would cost if in fact they had to be replaced or substantially repaired. The thought is that they should last very easily through 15 years, and other launches in the harbor are lasting much longer with those, but without needing transmission and engine release. So there's some debate about whether that we have setting aside enough. Talking about the set aside, if you go to page 5, one of the notable things there is how the set aside works. The budget includes, of course, operating costs that you'd expect. Some of them rely fairly substantially on services by the DPW in order to complete them. That would be engine oil changes, storage would be on town land. I had discussions with the 2 yards, and the number, if you went to yards, those numbers would be substantially different, but they rely on town providing some of those services, particularly the winter services cover areas stored. The hauling in and out is covered by one of the yards. The in-season is merely changing oil, and it's just merely the purchase of the material that be done in-house. The capital fund, the 11,004, is made up of 2 numbers. One is the periodic, the annual repayment of the purchase price. The initial purchase price is $125,525. That includes some of the drug testing and other licensing and inspections required by the Coast Guard. And there's $3,000 in there, which is an annual set aside towards the more major capital costs that would probably come up, but not certainly in 15 or 20 years. So that's just a simple overview of what's here. I don't know, Brian or Greg, would you like to add to that?
Peter did a nice job. Thank you for doing that. Just a couple of other notes on the budget. It also includes an allocation for some administrative time that would be not only the harbor master's time, but also some accounting and treasurer time as well. Not a large number, but we wanted to make sure that we were covering all the anticipated costs, so that you had a true picture of what it will take to run the operation. So currently there are the service has provided to 57 customers and seasonal customers. The break-even point, including all of these costs that you see, would be 70 customers at a price of $575 per season. It's been 500 a season for the last, I think, 3 or 4 seasons, or since inception. And so we felt like the increase of 575 was still a reasonable amount to ask for the service. And to get to that break-even point, 13 additional new customers would be needed. And again, the feeling is that certainly in a couple of years' time, that number should easily be achieved. So I would perhaps ask Brian if he has additional comments on sort of the overview before we get into your questions.
I think Peter and Kathy did a great job putting all of this together. I don't have too much to add. I do want to clarify about the pre and post season, which are really just the shoulders of the season. I did forward at some point some weeks ago the number of hours per month for each week, and we would start launch service the second week of May. It would be a total of 40 hours maximum for the week. It wouldn't be just weekends. It would be every workday. And one of the things that we discussed at the meeting is that in the very earliest part of the season and very latest part of the season, when there's very little or almost no launch service, that the harbor masters who are already on duty will be able to fill in. We won't have to cover with a second employee, a launch operator during those times, but it won't be just weekends. That was not quite correct.
Right, so you see that total of 1,222 hours, I believe. That included staff for the pre and post season, as well as the full season.
Right, correct.
Oh, okay.
This weekend staff, right?
Not just weekend staff. We starting the second.
Okay.
Starting the second week of May, if you saw that schedule I put together, I believe we start with 40 hours a week launch service the second week of May. So before that, there's nothing. And launch season goes through the third week in October, where it actually ramps down to 30 hours of launch operator hours.
One other footnote, and Brian, maybe you'd comment on this. I think you tested a little bit with some of the current subscribers, the increase in the price, and found that wouldn't be I don't think you felt as though that would be a problem, or that was the feedback you got, I think.
I'm sorry, Peter,
I think you spoke with some of the current subscribers about the raise in the price for the season.
Oh, yes,
And I
yes,
don't think
yes.
that seemed to be a hurdle from what I think you said.
Yeah, I agree. I've actually already had people reaching out, and I've said that if in fact there was a launch service, there would be an increase in the price, and there's been no pushback yet. Of course, nobody likes a price increase, but it's not an obstacle.
Tom, go ahead.
Unless I'm missing something, is there any insurance costs related to this, or is it covered by something that the town has for policy?
It would add to our policy. We're still waiting for that number. We don't expect it to be a very large number.
So consideration was given to it, though.
Yes.
Yes, it's likely to be a few $100s to add to our overall policy that we have already.
The second question was, is there any concern about peak times during the season? I'm thinking like the 4th of July weekend.
Right, so the 4th of July, 3rd of July for us, and then 4th of July are two biggest days. And then I think also that same week, the red, white, and blue breakfast. Those dates we probably would have both boats operating. But other than that, I never observed the current launch service coming anywhere near the need to run two launches on a daily basis.
That other boat would have to get licensed though.
Well,
Yes.
I believe it can carry a certain number of people without the license, right?
Correct, Sarah. So the smaller launch is what's considered an OUPV, and uninspected passenger vessel. So it can carry 6 people as long as the operator is licensed. You can't have an unlicensed operator. So that can carry 6 passengers without any issue.
Do you have questions?
Yeah, well, I like the work. We've got a number now of 575, and we have times, a schedule. And have we considered going out to like the mooring holders to see who would be interested in this? This is why we're considering this, is for convenience for the mooring holders. So, I mean, that to me would, if we can get 50 or 60 people to commit to that $576, then it'd be worth a try. And then it'd just be a matter of making sure that we're available when they need us to be, whether you have to shift to a 7 a.m. start as opposed to 8 might, people like to get out of the water early before the sun gets up. But something like that might play a part in how to maximize usage of this. But the biggest thing is an indication, a commitment from the mooring holders that they're willing to support this, I guess. Other than something a little bit more than just the vague references, like people actually saying, yes, I plan to sign up for this for the year. And if we have 70 people that are expressing that, then, to me, it's
Ryan has a plan. Ryan, can you speak to the plan you have here to put the service out?
Sure. So at some point, you probably all received a big long list of folks who have utilized the service, who reached out expressing concern that the service would be lost and that they would encourage the town to take it over. That's not insignificant number. I didn't want to reach out to the boating public and say, hey, we're going to offer a launch service. It's going to cost you this much, until I felt I could. I didn't feel I had the authority to offer a launch service if I didn't know we were going to have it. But I can say that we have, I would say, probably a couple dozen of those voters who have reached out to the town, who have sent emails, who have expressed a desire that the town take this on. I certainly could reach out to the broader boating public and see how many more people might be willing to give a verbal commitment. But we already have a pretty significant number of people who have expressed desire to see the service continue.
Okay, hold on one moment. Jack Burke has his hands up. Jack, do you need something?
Jack Burke, 16 Ocean Street. I just want to mention that I'm a user of that service. My son and I used it for the last couple of years. I was one of the people who reached out to Bayern, hoping that there would be service this year. And those people that I know that are that also use the service, very willing to continue it. I've never had a problem getting on the boat. It's started operations at 9 in the morning, and sometime, and if you call them, they were very willing to come a little early to get you out earlier if you want to go fishing. And sometimes if you just miss the boat, you might have to wait 15 minutes for them to come back. But I've never seen a full boat where they couldn't fit everybody who was at to go on, and we'd have to wait for them to come back another time. I do believe that there is an opportunity for marketing. At the time, really needed to go and put it when he ran it, but I think with a little better communication, I think there's a lot more people out there that'll use it.
Thank you, Joe. Okay, Peter, do you have something else?
Yeah, I think subject to the selectmen.
You need to speak up, I think.
Subject to the select board's views, I think the thought was we would set a deadline for April 15 or something in April to see what the signups were going to be before we would commit to actually offer the service. Because I think one of the preconditions that this board expressed was there needs to be an indication that we have sufficient sign up to make this self-sustaining, particularly as we start the service. So I think the advertising will be needed, but the intent was to use, and I don't know how that would interface with town meeting and all the various other parts. So that needs to be looked at, but there was an intent to use mid-April as a deadline to see what the signups look like.
Ian, do you have any questions?
Yeah, just to kind of throw out there, one of the concerns that I would have is just to make sure that the launch can truly operate with the proposed staffing. I wouldn't want to see the harbor master staff specifically. If for whatever reason people didn't show up on a given day, that suddenly the launch becomes their priority versus the priorities that you already have. Not that you would make that choice, but just to kind of hear some discussion about that would be good.
So I can tell you that we have 3 launch operators from Manchester Mooring who are ready to start tomorrow. They all approached me when Tommy told them he was going to move on. 3 of them approached me about operating again this year. I had a person in my office today, a former yacht club launch operator who was interested in being a backup driver, a fill-in, should there be a shortfall. And I also have another individual that I'll be interviewing who is interested in sort of more of the larger harbor master task, pump out boat, all that kind of stuff, but has the license that would allow him to drive a launch as well. So I don't have any concerns about staffing, having appropriate staff to run a launch for a season, providing the service that people pay for.
Thank you, Bob.
Mm-hmm.
Cory?
Yep, just had a question. So it looks like there'd be 2 boats, one operational and one is a backup. I know combined with the boats the town already has, let me sort of, what are the total number of boats and where would all these be stored? Because I know we are talking about, fishing locations and mooring holders and all that. So what's the storage plan here during the season?
Right, so the launch will be down at Reed Park, either on the inside with the pump out boat or on the probably on the inside overnight when it's not operating. That boat can be at Tux Point. A lot of the time when it wasn't operating, the operator would hang on an empty mooring and wait for a call. So during operation hours, it can be just about anywhere the operator's on the boat. Off hours inside at Reed Park. The spare launch, I really would envision being on one of the trailers up at the water treatment plant and not in the water, if it's not during those peak times we discussed around the 4th of July. There wouldn't be a need to keep it in the water and growing barnacles and eating up bottom paint. So, and that's the 2 extra boats that the department would have, and that's how I envision storing them.
If people were parking over at Masconomo, you'd be able to pick them up over there too.
Oh, sure. We can pick up at the boat club as long as the boat club doesn't mind. Fisherman's Facility, Reed Park, behind Town Hall, and Tux Point. Manchester Mooring used all of those facilities. Really, wherever your mooring is, wherever you usually park, whatever dock is there, that's where we would pick you up and get you to your boat.
Right, yeah, I mentioned it because Reed Park doesn't have parking.
No, that is a busier, yeah, no parking at all.
And Harrison, do you have a, like,
Maybe it's a scenario rather than a question.
okay,
Before Bion joined us, we had an assistant harbor master who completely wrecked one of the harbor boats. What happens when we've got 700 people signed up and paid and we lose a boat?
Well, yeah. It's the same scenario that we would face if we were to lose the Orange boat or the Eastern. We would press, we have a second boat, we could press it into service. It would not be as convenient, obviously, as our larger boat, but it could work. And then you're just waiting for that boat to be repaired so you can put it back in. That's the unfortunate part of boats on the water, with the hard stuff being covered up by water.
So you would have the second boat licensed for use at the start of the season.
The second boat won't be licensed at the start of the season. It'll still only be a 6-passenger boat.
it'll carry 6 people.
Yeah.
How many
Yeah.
people could the main launch carry?
The big one, oh gosh. 23, I believe is the number. But that boat, I've watched that boat operating for 3 seasons now. The only time I've ever seen that boat full, close to full, and it was full, was the Red, White, and Blue breakfast and evening on the 4th of July. So the capacity of that boat more than far exceeds what's needed on average. The 6-passenger boat, while it'll only carry 6 people, it carries 6 people. And if that's what we have to carry us through until our main vessel were repaired because of damage, then that's what we would have. It's what we have.
Lori?
Just to finish up my questions earlier, I guess my concern on this is the same as maybe what Andy expressed, is that if this is to be self-sufficient, that it does not want to tap into your time, Bion, and other paid employees of the town time. I think it really wants to be self-standing. And I mean, I think the ultimate benefit here, if you look at 57 or 70 users and 208 families or 2,000 families in Manchester, say 2/3 of them are local, we're essentially delivering a benefit to 1 or 2% of the households in Manchester. And my concern just is that it become town employee, run, which is, I think, something we want to keep an eye on. And I know that's the shoulder seasons, but these are expensive endeavors, so I think that's important to keep an eye on. The other one is kind of a succession issue, and I don't want to put any ideas in your head, but you do an amazing job getting stuff done. Because I think you have a background that is mechanically oriented and a lot of years on the water, and you're willing to jump in and get a lot of things done. When you retire, your successor, as hard as we may try, may not have that skill set, which means that a lot of the stuff goes to people we have to pay and services and outfits we have to pay. And so just thinking down the road, if we have an embedded person in yourself that can do a lot of this now, that's great. What happens when maybe we don't have that going forward? And that's just one of the questions in the future, but.
That's actually a really legitimate question and concern, Maury, and having to do with a lot more than just the launch. But I think if the deputy position is filled this year, the person hired for that position, a lot of their focus is going to be dealing with a lot of these waterfront things, because the administrative side that's grown exponentially needs to be dealt with, and that will be dealt with by me. So it really would envision that the person that the town hires to be a deputy is going to have those skill sets in their toolbox. I would certainly be looking for that, because if we don't have those elements in that person, then it kind of defeats a lot of the purpose of hiring for that position.
Anything else? So I guess I have one question, for Greg. We need to come up with $125,525 as a capital expense. Where would we envision getting that money?
So you could take it from the harbor account.
Okay.
It'll obviously drain that account down when those dollars would not be available for dredging right away. Because obviously a repayment plan over 15 years is longer than what we'll be needing dredging money before that for sure.
A lot more than 125K.
So I think that the question we get down to is this something we support putting in the budget?
Something like to weigh in first. before
No,
we-
finance committee is voting whether they support it financially. The select board would determine whether they want to support it
Right.
for the town.
Just let me put a footnote in the comment, which is that has a financial impact if they change the service level. Example, there's no touring, this is just only launch. The hours, I assume if they slip more hours, that number's gonna change. So I just want to throw out that question, that's all. That select board needs to weigh in, I guess, on whether they've been managing the service. So that's, if these hours, the hours they want, or is their staff ready to provide the services that we're making an assumption for in this budget? That's all.
We have to make decisions on the budget
Okay.
and we need to do it now.
And the select board can't give you any advice until after we've met.
Right.
I understand. I'm not
And-
correcting that.
And so I think that we need to make a decision from the finance committee. And then the select board needs to make a decision. And we need to determine exactly how much money would need to go into the budget to support this. And then get it into our budget by March 13th. That's kind of what we're looking at as the end date.
Just as a mechanical thing, it might be better to put this in as a separate article rather than have it as part of the general capital budget. And I say that because if something were to go wrong, and it needed to be passed over, it would be easier to pass over a separate article than to explain to the meeting that we're just going to ignore this in the
Yeah,
middle of the capital.
That's a good idea, and I think we can do that. But the question is there something the finance committee supports?
They certainly have my support. And now we're putting this together, so I just wanted to put that footnote in, that's all.
Okay.
I'm generally comfortable with it.
Okay.
You know, I think for the spirit of offering something that's already in service now and continuing that operation for, you know, even though it's for the particular benefit of, you know, a select portion of the population, I think it's good. Under the provisions as Peter has so well kind of described in his report, which basically, if it's not self-sustaining, it goes away. We sell the boats. And also under the proviso that it does not draw on our harbor master staff. Except on that very limited basis if we're.
And that they get the commitment of the number of people by April 15th before they actually agree to launch it.
Yeah.
That they have the number of people committed.
That's what I would focus on it.
Okay.
I'll put everything in motion to support it, but it would be nice to be able to pull the plug if we see from the revenue, if we don't have the commitment, if we don't have the support from the mooring holders.
Yep.
Then it's just gonna be an expense.
They have the subscriber list from the current operation.
Yes, we do.
So I would say I'm generally in favor of it, but I have a couple concerns. And one of them is this is a new business for the town. It's not like we're expanding the number of lifeguards or Parks and Rec. It's a totally new venture. And it's something that the town has not done before. So that is a concern. Revenue is important and costs are important. So if we don't get enough revenue from a number of subscribers and our costs go up because we're unable to hire or we're overusing town employees, that's something I think we want to keep an eye on. So my suggestion would be we do this, but that we analyze it like the second quarter, which would put it basically at the end of the first running season and really determine where the numbers are here. Because this has a way of kind of getting out in front of itself, and I really think we ought to make sure we know where this is going. So under those sorts of conditions, I would support it.
Same here, everything was said around the table, I agree with. In particular, I think it does need to have a close eye kept on.
So can we have by our March 13th meeting exactly what the financial impact would be to the budget? Fiscal year 25 budget?
Yes, we can. The only missing number, as I say, is that insurance number, and we can plug that in. But so you're at 125 for capital, plus some licensing work. So I think it was 125, 500 to round it, and then basically you have roughly a $40,000 operating expense all in.
So you're saying that has to go into the budget?
That has to be
Can't be
approved.
offset by the fees?
Correct. That has to be approved
Okay.
by the voters.
Okay,
It can be a separate article, but it needs to be approved.
and then we would have a revenue assumption from the fees,
Correct.
okay, that would go into the overall calculation.
That's right.
Okay,
So the financial commitment's somewhere in the neighborhood of 175 to 200,000.
Yep.
For the first year, all in.
Right.
Presuming, so this also, Greg, starts before the end of this fiscal year, or would it start officially on the beginning of the fiscal year we're budgeting on, which is July 1st?
Well, so you would need to you need to start it earlier than July 1st to be viable. So the capital money would need to be approved out of dollars that are currently available, like I indicated, from the harbor fund, so that you can move forward with purchasing the boats. And then we would need to do a small supplemental budget for the May and June operating expenses, supplemental budget for this current fiscal year as part of the annual town meeting. That's not unprecedented, but it's not the norm either, but nonetheless, we would need to pull out those first 6 weeks or so of operating expenses and include that as a supplement to this current fiscal year budget.
So would you envision that as like, as Ann suggested, perhaps a warrant article that has several parts? One, which is, does the community support the acquisition of this business? Number two, if it does, supplemental funding to let it operate through the end of fiscal year 24. And then it would roll into, well, and then a supplemental to add to the budget that we're doing for fiscal 25 right now.
That's correct, yes.
And I thought I read in your run-up, Peter, it seemed to imply that the purchase of the boats was as part of like a 15-year loan. But we were just talking about maybe appropriating the money to purchase the boats.
We would have to appropriate the money to buy the boats, and then the fees received, part of those would be used to pay back. Yeah, the 8,400 a year to pay back the initial outlay cost over 15 years, right?
So more of a loan by the taxpayers to the service.
Yes, that's. At the end of the day, it's an accounting matter, not a voting matter, right? Right. Because the town would put up the money for the boats, and
Right.
acquire that, and the town would own the boats.
Right.
And then the accounting would say, okay, year 1, year 2, year 3, you're working your way toward the 15-year,
As
principle of the boat.
as part of determining whether the service is self-sustaining.
Right.
And then if it isn't, that's when we talk about Yankee.
Could we mitigate that risk by renting the boats for the first year? Because if we make a 15-year commitment and we decide in April that it's not gonna be viable, then all of a sudden we have to salvage the boats and do all this, and it's probably gonna be a loss.
Yeah, we could sell them,
So it's an
Right.
asset, like a
But-
fire truck.
Yes, but it wouldn't be for.
but
the
we're
rest.
not gonna be
But
buying the
fire truck
boats.
costs about $10,000.
We're not gonna be buying the boats until there's the commitment that they have enough people to fund this.
Right, that's what I want to make sure.
So,
I mean, town meeting, what's the date of town
April
meeting?
24th,
So we designed the 15th to occur before the 24th, that's
Well, that's when.
yeah.
So it'll be on the floor recommendation, basically.
Well, no, it's a warrant article,
Right,
yeah. But yeah,
by the time, yeah.
Yeah.
Based on
right,
how much we're getting.
okay? So does that cover that?
Want to vote?
We wanna vote?
Or do we wait until just vote on the proposed money that Greg pulls together?
What's your time frame on that, Greg?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear the question.
I'm voting on should we wait to vote until we have the warrant article and the money's attached to it? Or do you wanna vote tonight?
I think it'd be helpful if you had a vote tonight to at least approve the concept of going forward, and then we can have the final article and numbers for you. As you get ready to finalize all the warrant articles. The next 2 weeks here.
Yeah.
But I think it would be helpful if you did take a vote tonight as to whether or not you approve of the service going forward as a town service.
Maureen?
Okay, so make a motion that the finance committee recommend proceeding further toward the purchase of the Manchester mooring launch service and the preparation of a town warrant to appear before this town meeting, with financial details to follow.
Second.
Andy seconds. Take a vote,
Yes.
Tom. Dean,
Yes.
Lori,
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
Peter, and Sarah votes yes.
Thank you all so much.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
Have a good night.
And thanks to Peter and Kathy for their work on developing the business plan and fleshing out all the details here.
Yes, they did the heavy lifting. You too, Greg. Thank you.
Did somebody send me that report just?
Yes, I know. Nice job. That's good.
Thank you.
I assume I may share it with the other members of the select board.
Okay,
Understand?
it's been discussed in our meeting, so it's a public record.
Yeah.
It's copyrighted though.
Okay.
All right, I can send it to Gail.
Yeah, I believe I copied Gail
Okay.
when I sent it to the board. You have it right, Gail?
No, I don't think I got that email.
Okay.
So if someone would forward it to me, that'd be
I
great.
will- I will forward you that email.
Yeah, and I'll be forwarding the to all the select board members as well.
Okay.
It's done.
So we get 6 copies, this is okay.
Yeah. So the next item is the fiscal year 25 funding strategy for the capital budget. We have some information on town debt history, debt limit ratios, and the history of general fund taxation. And I thought we would kind of talk about that a little bit up front. And then I think that we need to, I'm hoping we'll be able to make a determination on whether we're approving the items in the capital budget. And then based on our strategy as to what monies we want to use, then Andrea would have an opportunity to go back and come back to us with the actual breakdown of the funding for the capital budget. Does that make sense, Greg?
Yes, it does.
Okay. So several weeks ago, you were sent the debt and staffing trends. I have it from January 31st. And then we have the taxation used for capital from 2015 to 2024. Okay. So I'm looking at the debt ratios of general bonded debt outstanding last 10 years.
So you're looking at the spreadsheet or the PDF?
Yeah,
This was a meeting up in the.
January 31st is when I downloaded that.
Up there, and you sent it.
I got it. I think it was directly from Greg. I can follow it too.
No, it's all right.
Yeah, you sent that to us, right, Greg, directly?
I'm sorry, what was that?
You sent us the email with these sheets in it.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. So it came from Greg. So do people have it up?
Sure.
So what this is showing is that our high was in 2018 at 10 million. Right? 0.42% of the taxable value of property and 21.75 per capita. we're now down to in 2023, we were down to 6 million. So Greg, we have an overall assumption that debt service will not exceed 10% of the operating budget, correct?
Correct, yes.
So the assumption in the capital budget we received is like adding 9.2 million in bonds,
Correct.
a little over 9.2 million. So that brings the total over anything higher than we've had in the last 10 years.
Yes.
So that we're talking about including our overall, is it our overall budget including the school and the school debt, or this is town only?
It's town only, right, Greg? Town debt service doesn't exceed 10% of the town operating.
Correct. So town operating, the 16 million range, so 1.6. I mean, you're way under that with,
But if we add 9 million. Yeah,
So this is the 5 million.
Yeah, could you please? Yeah.
The sewer,
oh,
the water meters. And the development of the.
let's go to the actual page in the book, which is 192. $195. So the bonds are 1.85 million of water plant upgrades and PFAs. This is as of today. 2 million in water pipe replacement. 1.5 million in water meter replacement. And 3.9 million for the sewer plant upgrades. Now, we may decide we don't want all those in this year's budget, but that's part of this discussion about the bonding of whether adding 9 million's reasonable, and on this bond that's projected, what is the estimated impact on taxes? I think you had a consider the plant's number.
Can I clarify something?
Yep.
On the way to answering that question, sir, is that, so right now, 2023, it shows close to $6 million in bond obligations, and we're talking about, at least with the proposed capital, it's another 9 and 6 or whatever. And then the idea that this doesn't exceed 10% of the town operating budget, that's on the basis of the annual obligation of that bond level?
I think it's a debt service.
What has to be paid in a given year against the bond?
That's what my understanding is, right, Greg?
right, that as a general policy, that was your target.
Right, and so in 2023, it was 2.54%. If you look at the next page on that PDF.
Oh,
This is saying a limit of 5% of equalized valuation. Don't know where that came from.
That's a state that's a state law.
Okay,
So I mean, we're at 3 billion in total valuation.
Yep.
So we're way under that 5% cap.
So Greg, do you have brackets or thoughts on debt service cost? For, for say 10 million, what,
So,
is there an allowable number? Are we going by historical number or what? Is this like a prim thing where we can put a big number, a little number on there?
so for a rough rule of thumb is for every million you're borrowing, it's gonna cost you 80,000 annually in debt service.
Okay,
So if you wanna round off to 10 million, you're looking at it adding 800,000 in annual debt cost.
which is,
9 million times 8 is about
720,000,
720,000.
right?
yeah, and, 1% on taxes is about 300,000.
Correct.
Because our value is about 30 million. So this is about, yeah,
You're in the you're close to the 2.5.
yeah, 2.5%.
So the thought that this would be excluded debt. So it's outside of the parameters of 2.5, assuming voters approve it.
But the taxpayers still pay 5% increase, but it's my understanding that we can appropriate a bond, but we don't pay for it until work is completed. And we could decide to come up with money from other sources along the way to not bond the full amount.
Correct.
So,
So this is sort of like a discussion about how much bonding might we do if we choose to bond and what's the
Right.
top limit? What's the cap that we don't want to go?
go over, right?
So how do we read that? How do we read that second page of that PDF, that computation, legal debt margin?
So that's apparently, whoops. A touchscreen did something it wasn't supposed to do. Hate that. So it's my understanding that the state limit is debt cannot exceed 5% of the equalized valuation of the town. And that is based on the total amount of the debt, not the debt service.
So what's the number in a given column that's the most meaningful for our discussion?
So the bottom number tells you the total debt applicable to the limit as a percentage of the debt limit. So if you look at the,
I think we're 1/20th, and that 5% means we're basically 1/20th of the way toward hitting the 5% of the equalized value, which in Manchester is like 2.3 billion.
3. We're up to 3 now, yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm looking at 2014, I'm sorry, I'm way over on the left.
Yeah, that's it.
So if our equalized valuation is 3 billion, Greg, what's the 5% number that we're concerned about? Is it 5% of the 3 billion that you can have an outstanding debt?
That's correct.
That's that legal debt margin, that number, that 2023 column. 144.7, and that's thousands. So that's not.
Yeah.
So does that mean that's the total debt obligation that we can have
Yes.
in a given year?
Yeah.
So we're way off of that.
Yeah, it's like 150.
So we don't have to worry about the state.
Okay, so we're rolling on that.
Okay.
So
Right, so
so
yeah,
that's a different.
roughly our debt, our maximum debt load is 150 million range.
Okay.
Yeah.
But then we say that for debt service, we don't want it to exceed 10% of our operating budget. So we don't want debt service to exceed 1.6 million.
Well, yeah, 1.8, but yes.
So Greg, not to repeat the question I asked, but I just want to make super clarity on it. This excludes the school, right? Because we look at, I mean, we've talked about debt numbers approaching 150 million over the next 20 years as we think about all sorts of things going on in town. And a big chunk of that is school debt,
Correct. So that is separate.
totally separate. Okay.
$80,000 per year.
Yeah.
So then, going back to page 1 and 2023, our obligation is about 6 million. And then at least what we have currently proposed is another 9.6 or so. We're still pretty far away from any sort of kind of statement, and it's more a matter of,
Yeah, we're under 1%.
yeah, how do we feel about it?
Right.
And so is the service on that close to $16 million, is that well under our 10%?
No, you're getting, you're bumping up against that 10% rule pretty quickly.
Yeah, because you're talking about for 9 million, you're adding 720,000 and your 10% is 1.8 million. And you already have existing.
Well, the current debt service was right around $1 million. You know, that'll be dropping every, over the next few years as we retire current debt.
So
But
the 9 million puts us pretty much at the cap.
it does.
Or just Y 27, we're scheduled to go for another 50 million. The DPW garage and the PFAS plant.
Right.
Now, those are capital improvements, but would sink my teeth in behind the bond. This year's, okay, it's capital, but you're really not gaining anything. You're fixing your sewage treatment plant. You're getting more efficient water meters, and you're doing design work for the PFAS. That, to me, isn't something that you spend money on that you don't have.
Well, I think that we have consistently supported the sewer plant upgrades.
Absolutely.
So
I'm not saying not to do it.
I don't want to get into a discussion of whether or not we support that, because we've
Right,
talked
no.
about that endlessly,
Yes.
and have supported.
Yeah.
So then we have debt service we can have. We have taxation we can have, and we have use of reserves. Plus you got these other funds, but that's not.
Of the existing 6 million, what falls in? Wasn't there some conversation about some of that debt service being retired?
Well, we have it, it's in our book. It is on, debt service is page 201.
I forget the timing of it, but I remember conversation about some of that debt being retired, the 6 million that's existing.
But it's not presented nicely for us.
Let's see this little graph right here.
Right. So it's relatively stable from 24 to 31. And then it drops way off in 2034.
So it's
A long ways away.
if,
Yeah, well, 2034, we lose, well, I guess we don't. It's high school, we lose OPEB.
But that's not debt service.
That's not debt service.
What is the, what's the amount that we have, if you know this, Greg, from our current reserve fund? Based on, what are we land on, 8%?
8%, yeah. So I had those calculations. I think it was 3.8 is the 8% calculation. 3.8 million. Do I brought those pages? Because we talked about this a number of meetings ago. And it was like 3.884. And we had, reserves. We had like 4. This table of contents I find difficult. Free cash, okay, page 22. Okay, so page 22 has estimated reserves at the end of fiscal year 24 of 4.3.
Yeah.
So that includes what we approved at the April 23 town meeting. So when she does the reserves, she assumes any money in that fiscal year 24 budget that we've allocated to come out of the reserve, she's assuming it's happened when she does the estimated
Got it,
number.
okay. And the only change to that 4.3 million would be unexpected revenues or expenses being
Same.
less than what we project. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's at least a million. That's available. Based on the 8%. 3.2 would be that number, right?
Oh, did you calculate that?
I thought I heard you say.
I thought it was 3.8, but I thought it was,
Probably.
what's our? $32 million?
Total, right?
Yeah, it's about 30.
Is it 32 million?
What's 34? What's our current total budget number? Is it 34 million, Greg?
30, 37,
37.
37,857.
For the total school budget, is that what you're asking?
No, total town budget.
So it's not budget.
Total of everything is 37,857.
So 8% of that is about 3 million.
Okay,
So our projected total if you're including everything, capital and all expenses, you're over 40 million.
no, we don't include capital in our 8% number. It's only
Yeah.
operating.
Yeah, okay, all right, fine.
Yeah.
So that would put you around 37.
So it's about 3 million.
Yeah, 3 million. Which is 1.3 million.
Yeah.
To spend. Now, and this capital budget assumes spending 549,000. However, at a prior meeting, we used 800,000 from the stabilization fund for open.
Right. So, yeah, unless we want to reconsider that,
Right, that's the question, and then we also had voted 300,000. But I think that that was a separate article, not a total of 1.1 million. I think we were talking about having two articles for OPEB. One for 800,000 from the stabilization, and then the other 300,000. That if the 800,000 didn't pass, then would do the 300,000. Isn't that what we decided? The minutes don't reflect that, and that's what
Right,
kind of,
that's what.
okay.
So is the interest on OPEB greater than the interest that we would pay on bond debt service? On service?
I have no sense of what we pay for bond service today, 5%?
I think we'll do better than, in terms of what our debt service, our interest payment on the bonds.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we could, well, it's a little volatile right now, but yeah, 5% would be the most.
What do we think is the reasonable interest number for the OPEB then, by comparison?
We're assuming in the actuarial calculation 7.5.
7.5, yeah.
And in most years, we've done substantially better than that. I think for the year that ended June 30th, 23, the market was down, so the earnings were not that high for that year.
We've had years where it's been like 8.1 or 8.
Oh, it's been higher than that. It's been in double digits.
So I'm sorry, you're talking about the PRIP?
Yes, okay.
Yeah,
But is there an interest penalty with our OPEB obligation?
what do you mean?
No, we're way ahead of that game. It's like, it's helping us fund. So by putting in a certain amount, we're sort of effectively getting like a match, if you will, like an interest match.
Okay, all right.
So it's revenue based as opposed to expense based.
To decrease what future contributions. And I think that when I asked in July of 23, what we would need to contribute to fully fund OPEB, it was about 3 million. And we've been putting in slightly under 300,000 a year.
Yeah.
So if we put in the 800,000, that's gonna should drop a number of years off and make an earlier repayment.
So is it a better idea to put more money as we already voted toward OPEB than incurring the, more debt and bond?
Well, one other factor to consider, you need to remember the school feasibility study.
And what's that gonna be?
Well, that could be anywhere from 450 to 700.
And when are we gonna have that number? Will we have it next week when we meet with the schools?
I hope so, yes.
Well, and that's, I guess in my mind, up in the air a little bit. Because, just for the reason that, if it doesn't make sense to pursue the expense of that project, then it doesn't make sense to do the feasibility study.
Okay,
Good question.
I mean, the timing of that project may just be a problem.
Yes.
I know we'd like to push it out a few years and there'll be a lot of argument or do it now or lose your place in line, but at the end of the day, it may just not be a good time for this town. So, yes.
Yeah, and I guess I still come at it from the angle of, if the school committee and if Essex, somehow still feels like, okay, we can get our operating obligation under control, and we also then still support the Essex project, then, then I would tend to support it too, but, so far, that hasn't done what we've been hearing.
I mean, something I read in the paper, read someplace. Seems like Essex is not as concerned about affording the school budget this year as they had before, because something like their growth number is higher than they predicted, and their number of people at North Shore Tech is down by 3. but they're still doing it year to year. So it's very volatile as to,
And they ended up at a budget that was, you know, still allegedly this middle number.
Right.
2.9%, but that is vastly different than the story that we heard last year. So I'm
Right.
confused about where we are in the trajectory of what the
Right.
school needs.
Well, and then you layer on top of that, a capital project like the elementary school. The numbers are just, we're arguing about pennies in the glove compartment.
Yeah.
Right. And the next one,
Yeah.
it's big.
Yeah.
That was part of my thinking on, this might be a good year to try to avoid the bond because we do have a break in the school budget. And we've had a break for a couple of years now. To help Essex out.
we also have unused levy capacity. I mean, I think that since 2020, fiscal year 21, I think it really was, we've been routinely keeping the tax rate less than 2.5%.
Yeah, right.
It seems to me we've gotten to the point now where we can't afford to do that with all our projects coming up.
So in other words, if we have 0.5% of levy capacity, for argument's sake, we go to the 3% this year
Good,
and bond a little less for any projects that we want to pursue.
yeah. I mean, we could do that.
Yeah, right.
And I don't think that would be the end of the world.
We're talking about, right?
I mean, I think we have about 3.5% of excess levy capacity.
Oh, that much.
Well, we had 2.5% for the first year, we had 1% from the next year, I think. Or maybe 0.5%, 2.5, 3, and then we've had small amounts from other years. Well, last year with the school budget down.
Right.
We gained an additional amount.
Right.
Would it make sense to use some of that at some point? I mean, if you build it up too much, you're not gonna be able to sort of grab it all at once.
Right, and that's what I'm wondering is should we be using some of that excess levy capacity
It's not like
this
you can
year
Bank it and go to the
to-
bank and pull it back out.
to have the taxes go up 3% rather than 2.5%?
I mean, I suppose for, you know, if it's toward a capital project, which is sort of this finite expense versus this ongoing operating obligation. There still might be merit to considering a bond instead of, you know, using, you know, excess levy.
Except that,
Because once you incur that excess levy and our current levy capacity, then that's your tax rate, you know. Even after the projects are done.
yeah, but it doesn't impact the levy calculation. In other words, if we had been taxing at 2.5%.
Yeah.
All of those years, I think our taxes would be about 4% higher than they are. The increase would have been 4% higher.
I think Sarah's right, because it's whether you use it now, later, or earlier.
And it's
So-
how much you want the tax rate to increase in any given year. So if we used 0.5% of it this year, the taxes would go up 3%.
Right.
And so it wouldn't be.
Okay.
It wouldn't be an enormous amount, and you still have other excess levy capacity to use in other years, and I'm not talking about increasing the operating budget.
Yeah.
Just using more taxation for capital items.
And
That's what we're
you are-
talking about.
And you are sort of covering it closer to when you use it as opposed to putting it into debt, which you're covering successive years out. It is confusing.
And I think, you know, I guess the other thought that I have is that presumably at some point, the pendulum swings the other way with regard to the district, you know, apportionment. And it's, you know, so the 3.4% budget hits us at 4% or something like that, then if we still have spare levy capacity.
It doesn't really matter, in my mind.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter whether we have excess levy capacity or not. the taxes are gonna go up by X amount, it just matters whether you need to vote for an override.
Yes.
That's all I'm thinking of.
You know,
But that can be significant.
right, but
Understand this.
So mechanical question, maybe, Greg, how long can you maintain excess levy capacity and not use it? Is there like a statute of limitations on it?
No, no.
just a calculation.
Yeah.
It's just a calculation done annually and it is what it is. It's not a use it or lose it situation at all.
Right. I didn't know if there's some accounting thing where, you know, after 8 years, you had to do something.
State hasn't figured
No.
that out yet, just.
They will. Well,
Yeah, it's that unused levy capacity is an annual calculation that the state verifies. And it just keeps going year after year.
Is the net of this conversation to in fact incur less than the possibly projected debt in lieu of using tax capacity to meet some of that, some or all of some of that
Well,
otherwise bonded expense?
I think what we need to do, so if we're saying we're willing to have the taxes go up to 3%.
Yeah.
We're willing to have the reserves drop to 8%.
Right.
And do we wanna maintain the OPEB at the 800,000?
There's the question.
That seemed like that was kind of an aggressive.
Okay,
Well, in light of these other factors.
Right.
And
so
you say that's 500.
What was our
You want-
logic? I'm trying to recall, what was our logic to using reserves for OPEB?
well, I came up with a calculation which would have used about 500,000 and taken out of stabilization because the
Right.
stabilization was too high. And we felt that it was easier to sell
Right.
using stabilization for OPEB.
And stabilization requires a majority of
2/3.
2/3 to get it out, so
Yeah.
get it out with a meaningful.
Right, and then somehow the conversation morphed and all of a sudden we increased it to 800,000, which was the original 300,000 for OPEB.
Right.
Plus the 500,000 for 8.
Yeah.
And then we had the other 300,000 as the alternative, so things kind of morphed.
That's right, I
So,
was getting confused,
yeah,
trying to
so
remember how we got there.
we could say for OPEB, 500,000 from stabilization.
Yeah. I think there's some clarity going to the voters and saying, we need a 2/3 vote. And this is the exact purpose of it, and it's something concrete like OPEB. When it becomes a little more, you know, a little here, a little there, it just this lacks clarity.
Yeah, and I think that the other concern is because the stabilization is more than half of the total
It's getting big,
reserves.
It's almost 2 million.
Yeah, that if we get down to the 8%, then we're not gonna have much free cash left.
So I'm trying to remember in our arriving at the 8%, like what number was stabilization? Did we sort of come up with a?
We came up with 25% of the total of stabilization, or about 2%.
So on that basis, that would be like $750,000 or so.
Right.
And so that means, you know, we could take, you know, 1.2 million out of stabilization, right?
Right.
Right, but we're not.
Well, we could use it for something else on the capital plan.
Yeah,
Something concrete.
Yeah,
I guess I'm in complete favor of making that
Small.
stabilization.
Yeah.
Reasonably small. It's probably not doing too much money.
and so that's why I think we were taking the 800,000 out because we thought we could sell the OPEB. But it sounds like we don't wanna take that much out because we need money for other things. So if we drop it down to 500,000,
And we think the target number we'd like in stabilization after all this, is what number?
25% of our total reserve, which is 8%, which would now be about $3 million. So.
Greg, is it possible with the vote of the voters to take money out of stabilization and put it into reserves? I mean, it's a political hurdle. You're asking people for faith to take something that requires a 2/3 vote and pull it out, but is that done? Because that's sort of what we're talking about here.
When you say reserve, do you mean the fund balance?
Yes, yes.
I mean, yes, you can do that.
Okay, so effectively, you're saying to the voters, we've got, trust us, we've got 2 million in stabilization, which requires a 2/3 majority vote. And we've got enough projects coming along, we'd like to move that to just plain reserves.
I don't think.
I don't think that's.
No, but the other thing that you could look at is the Council on Aging Mason building. You could look at that as coming out of reserves if you want to approve that.
So I'm on that.
It's on our capital plan. Yeah.
Greg, wasn't there some discussion at the end of the last meeting about the 2/3 being changed statutorily to a lesser vote for stabilization? Didn't I hear
Yes.
something?
Yeah, so that they have to confirm whether that has been made official yet, but that has been the proposal.
What's been proposed, not passed?
Well,
Is that-
I need to confirm that. I know
Okay.
that there was some action that had included it, and I just need to verify that it has been approved and it's all signed, sealed, and delivered.
It's sort of, anyway.
It needs to be that aspect of the argument.
Right.
Okay. So,
If we move the OPEB to 500,000 from 800, it's still forward the goal.
yes,
Right.
So
It accelerates.
And it's responsible use of.
Yeah, well, even on the path that we were on,
yeah,
that
that's
was closer to 300,000 or something.
yeah, but I think we were starting to lose ground. Yeah. When I looked at the numbers for the report, it didn't look as nice as it had in prior years.
This is Dan Sherman's report.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we didn't have the earnings in the print fund. So there was a lot of losses. There was a lot of stuff amortized. Though I still find his report confusing because I can't tell.
So much leveraging. on
Well, and the
actual revenue stuff.
contribution
Crazy.
includes not only what we put into it, but what we're paying for health insurance
Right.
now. So there's no number
Yeah.
that's nice now where you say, okay, this is what we should be putting in. Right, Greg? It's not as neat as it used to be.
Correct.
Yeah,
It's
okay.
it's a little fungible.
Okay, so do we want to go through the items on the capital plan and decide what we want to approve at this point? And then give our parameters for funding, and then have Andrea come back and kind of tell us what would happen.
Right.
Till we get another go at it. And one of the things that confused me, Greg, is when we voted for the ambulance, it was my understanding that close to 400,000 was a reappropriation of the money that had been set aside for the ladder truck. But that's not being reflected in the numbers.
In what number?
In the funding numbers. So we had appropriated 1.5 million for the ladder truck.
Oh, yes,
Right.
yes. I see what
We
you're saying.
spent 1.1. I think we spent 1.1 and then we had that SUV that was 80,000 from a reappropriation. We still should have money to reappropriate towards that ambulance. And I don't see that here. And we approved it on the basis that a certain portion was being reappropriated.
Yeah, let me follow up with Andrew on that.
Okay. Because the only thing we have is reappropriating is the library stuff at 200. When I look at her summary. And that the ambulance is coming all from taxation.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So I just, be nice to have that clarified, because one of the things we talked about many months ago is reappropriating those capital monies that weren't spent. And I've kind of lost track of that spreadsheet where that calculation, I think Andrea had, and you had presented a spreadsheet, which we agreed to.
Yes.
That page off the list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know some was the library, and 200,000 of that has been reappropriated. And I can't remember exactly what else was on the list.
The
Yeah,
library-
Let me sit down with Andrew and just
Okay.
revisit all those numbers for you and make that
Okay.
clear.
But if the library was reappropriating, which would be, because right now it shows up as $200,000 here, then this presumably is all like taxation, right?
No, because if you look down at the summary at the bottom, it has other funds of 200,000, and that's the 200,000 of reappropriation. Because the comment lines for the library says reappropriate.
Yeah, she definitely shows the 200 as reappropriated.
Oh, I see. Okay, all right, so that doesn't get totaled into the amount that's for new appropriation.
It's a new appropriation, but it doesn't come from free cash or taxation.
Right.
It's from prior appropriations.
Yeah.
So we're just reappropriating, which means we save a year.
Yeah.
Cause it doesn't have to go into free cash and sit there for a year.
Right.
Before we spend it.
But all that's going away, because the library just wants to do a study now, they don't want to do.
No, we approved 200,000 for the library.
I know, but I'm saying, they went back and.
No,
said-
they didn't. The change to the library was that the walkway is 6,500 rather than 50,000. And then 43,500 is a building assessment,
Right,
and then there's 150,000 for the match on the grant.
okay,
Because they needed to do the building assessment in order to apply for the grant.
right, no, that's.
So it's
but that was-
200,000.
That's what, and then under general building upgrades, the 50,000 was for the library roof. Are we gonna hold on that because of the study, the
No.
building assessment, or are we gonna go?
The 50,000 is for general building upgrades. It's not just for the library.
Right, but that's what it was, that was the main,
No, the library was 7,500
for the roof.
to repair to put a chimney cap on and repair the chimney. Yeah,
It's county to me.
yeah.
Okay, so that was just.
That would be this year's fund, not next year's fund,
Oh,
for the roof.
Okay,
For that
fiscal year
chimney.
24.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we used
that's
the
going ahead.
Okay,
Well, then that was-
so now the other thing, Greg, is I read in the paper, it's always dangerous when I read in the paper, but I read in the paper that we're getting additional chapter 90 funds
Yes,
to the tune of 70,000 or 74,000.
I believe it's 74,000.
See?
Pennies.
So I don't know if that means we can drop down the road resurfacing number.
I need to talk to Chuck about that. I think he'd be nervous about the the higher cost of of asphalt, et cetera.
But I'm gonna make the same argument to you that I'm gonna make to the school committee. Is if we didn't feel we needed more money in the original budget.
Yeah.
Then when we have savings, we should reduce the budget.
So let me check on the timing of those dollars.
Okay. We're talking fiscal year 25.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Just- is it timing?
I have some concerns on the DPW being stretched too thin with all that they're trying to do this year. And keeping the quality up. So, to cut their funding a little might actually help them.
Well, what do we have left over from the Pleasant Street water mains? No, but we had appropriated 1.8 or 1.9 million. We did Walker Street. I can't believe that cost as much.
I thought he said there was leftover and it was kind of factored into the current request, but.
Yeah, but we've got 2 million to be paid for with a bond in water replacement.
Yeah.
Which I question, if we have money left over from last year, do we really need the 2 million? And he was talking about doing Pleasant Street, beginning of Old Essex and Pleasant Street Extension.
And Mill Street was a big one that came up because of that grant. So I mean, he's got a lot of work that's not even in this budget next year with the culvert, the rotunda. With the sewer project.
I don't think, I don't know, I don't feel comfortable. Based on the work that they have done, and whatever they're proposing, I don't really have a concern over their appetite for doing work. I feel like they're reliable in that sense. Whether or not we have enough money to fund everything that's in the capital budget, that's another question. And where we.
I know they mentioned overlaying Mill Street, and I was looking at that, and it's not just an overlay, the shoulders are, there's gonna be some full depth work that really needs to be done to do that correctly. The
And I
stretch
think that's,
beyond,
that part of that may be covered from, by the Mass Water Works grant.
right, no,
Yeah.
the part, yeah, that part, but always smoothly,
Okay.
because it was there. And we'll keep going, I support that, but there's 5 other places it's gonna be as well.
Okay, so we've got 1.4 million recommended in DPW. Are we okay with this number with the question mark on the road resurfacing?
Yeah, I think contingent on whatever the answer is there. Doesn't strike me as a huge influence one way or the other.
No, but it's,
But just as a principle perhaps.
yes. So are we okay with the DPW number? Or is there something we don't? Okay, okay. Land use, we moved that to operations, so there's nothing there. Town hall computer phone upgrades. 30 grand.
I don't have it, I'm just rolling up and answer your question. The town hall, what's that, what are you?
I'm on the fiscal year 2025 capital improvement.
I know where you are, just.
Okay. And under town hall,
Yeah.
there's a line for computer / phone upgrades in the amount of 30,000.
Is this an ongoing thing, Greg? like annually, or is this a special case, or?
The IT upgrades are pretty consistent. The phone is not, that's a once every 10-year type.
That's about a third of it.
Yes.
I think just looking at the multi-year, it runs at about 20,000, except for this year and next year, 30. Which just must be the phone differential.
It's 30 every year.
No, I was looking at the 25 to 29.
Oh,
Yeah.
26 is 30,000, 27 is 20.
Goes down at 27. This year and next year, 30,000. For the multi-year.
So 27 is a big year where we figure some signaling will come online. Right.
See,
They're planning to, well, there's talk of them moving in, I thought in 2026, isn't it, Greg?
I'm sorry, unfortunately, I don't have the book with me, and I'm looking at a different spreadsheet, so.
No, cell signaling, I think that they were talking about moving in calendar year 2026, aren't they?
Yes,
Yeah. So calendar year 2026 is probably in fiscal year 27. We may have some revenue in fiscal year 26, depending on how far along it is by June 30th of 25.
right, there may be some partial assessment.
so part of this is building permit, part of this is revenue, tax revenue on facility.
Right, and building permit, it seems to me that when we get the building permit in from cell signaling, we should be applying it to capital items because it's a one-time
So
revenue source. Right, of the building fees, Greg?
That's correct. I mean, that'll be an artificial, very
Yeah.
large jump.
And it's hard to know when we'll receive that, because what I'm seeing with all the building going on around me, you apply for the foundation first and just pay the fee on the foundation.
Mhm.
And get that done before you pay for the rest of the building permit, because it costs a lot less.
Yeah, but those fees are not just a cash windfall, they're to inspect the work and, get all the building fees pay for the building inspection and the site.
Right, but what I'm saying is that the revenue for the building fees will be a one-shot deal. And therefore, we don't want to use it to operating costs,
Right.
because it's a one-shot deal, that we
Right.
would want to use it for capital.
Yeah, I was referring to the tax revenue.
And it comes in pieces, which the other big, once there's something parts and pieces.
Stage building, wasn't it, if I remember right? You know, gonna be moving in stages?
Well, they're building, I want to say, close to 2/3 of it in phase one.
Yeah, there's another phase which, is probably years down the road.
Yeah, they haven't committed it all to when it's going to be.
the reason committee is about $1 million in building permit revenue, which presumably, even if it comes in bits and pieces, we'll see before tax on the middle of.
Right. Yeah. But actually, I did a calculation this afternoon, and the revenue from the building fees is not that much less than the annual taxes. It's really pretty close, yeah. It's like getting the taxes a year early. Okay, library we've already done. Okay, next item is the Council on Aging Mason Building purchase for $750,000. We haven't talked about this at all. Is that number still good, Greg?
I have some hesitation on that. Primarily because we may have to structure the purchase a little differently. So the original construct was for us to purchase our share of the building and then to renovate what would ultimately be the Masons portion. But legally, there's some problems with doing it that way. So we may have to, instead of 250,000, which was the estimate for the renovation costs for their portion, give them the full 1 million. And then they have to pay for their renovation.
So you think the number may be higher?
Yeah.
So, the upper limit is 1 million, not the 750.
Is the renovation just more or less to kind of segregate space for the Masons to continue out?
But it includes a small addition. It's a reconfiguration of the building. And the current, I don't know how familiar you are with the space, but the current sort of multi-purpose room, dining area would be expanded out towards the sewer plant by about 15 feet. And that becomes the new ceremonial room. And the town would take over the existing ceremonial room and use it as a multi-purpose room. And then we add an addition towards the parking lot for offices and small meeting spaces. And so the plan would be to ask the taxpayers to pay for the purchase and then to fundraise for the renovation and expansion work.
Has this already been, is this supported by the select board or?
Yes, yes. Again, we're not at a formal vote point because we don't have a final P&S, but we're getting close. But yes, they are supportive of this moving forward.
And so is there, I guess, you know, relative to the amount being asked, it would be helpful to be able to see whatever has been developed for any kind of planning.
I think that, I think that what he's saying now is
Yeah,
we're paying $1 billion for the building.
right, I get it.
And any work done by the Masons, which was expected to be 250, they'll have to pay for the 250.
Right, and I can appreciate why that would be. I guess I'm mystified why we have to add on to a building to create space for the Masons and also accommodate Council on Aging, when Council on Aging doesn't have any space at all today.
But we're not gonna be doing that addition. The Masons will be.
No, I know.
We're just paying $1 million for the building.
Like how big is the building? How much space does it?
To make the space fully functional for Council on Aging, you need office spaces in addition to multi-use space. And so there is this proposed addition coming towards the parking area, basically for that reception area and office space.
But that's not paid for by the taxpayers. That is
That's anticipated to be paid for through fundraising.
through fundraising.
Yes.
But the only thing the town is purportedly paying for is the building. And then it's gonna be split in 2 condos, right?
Right, then we create a condominium where we have basically 2/3 and the Masons has 1/3. And then we share some of the common area expenses.
Basic question is, we're talking about spending money inside of an area where we're also talking about spending a lot of money to strengthen, reinforce against sea level rise.
Yes.
And I know we're on a hillside here a little bit. I've looked at it carefully because you've mentioned this, but is this too close to rising water?
So the building itself and where we would expand the footprint, it falls just outside of the anticipated, sort of worst case scenarios for flooding. Obviously, if you get a hurricane with a a 20-foot storm surge, sort of all bets are off. But
That January storm go all the way up to that road? No, it went all the way up to the property of the Masons. The water.
yeah, the water has gone up to the, basically to the curbing,
Yeah,
but it has, the Mason building itself is up, I want to say 6 or 8 feet from that curbing level.
No. And in the overall scheme of things, not to sound crazy, but for a council on aging facility we've been looking for a long, long time, $1 million is not crazy. I mean, we've been throwing numbers around that are well in excess of that for other properties around town that haven't quite worked out.
well, the Cornerstone Church we were looking at.
Exactly, yeah, so, and it had a fire station behind and that water. I just wanted to ask.
And then the space certainly has uses beyond just the senior center. I mean, the main multi-purpose room will be able to function as a meeting space for evening meetings. Could be divided up into two meetings, simultaneous rooms. You could partition it with a movable partition to divide it up into smaller meeting spaces. I think there are benefits beyond just a senior center.
From an engineering point of view, if you thought about utilities, or raising it up or something like that, that might be worth consideration. And obviously it has to be ADA accessible, but a second floor might give you, if it's allowed by zoning and height restrictions and all that.
Yeah, the existing structure that's there will not support a second story.
You mean physically it won't, not as opposed to legally? Like,
Correct. Right,
physically.
just the construction of that building. Right,
There's also no natural lighting in that space, so probably would have to put in some stuff.
right, there'd be some windows put in that the current ceremony room.
That's how we talk. Sure.
So do we support this?
Is the number of million?
Million was cents. I'm assuming it's a million.
Yes,
Okay.
We've been trying to find a place for this for ages.
It seems like less of a money pit potential than the Baptist church.
Right, I agree with you. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is anything happening there? We still have a right of first refusal.
No, that lapsed a long time ago.
So that's just.
It was only for like 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And they're not gonna sell it for $1 million now.
Doesn't work out, we probably use it as affordable housing.
Okay, so you think this?
Well, I'm
million
trying to
is-
think how we afford it, that, mine is, I understand Lori's point, I think it's a very good location, got a lot of things. I'm just trying to put the numbers together in terms of, okay, where does the $1 million come from?
Well, and I think what I want to do is to go through this capital
Okay, if you
budget
want, okay.
and say, what are we supporting in theory?
Okay,
And then have Andrea come back with
fine.
the numbers as to funding sources and then revisit it.
Okay, well, then I'm in favor of it.
Does that make sense?
That's my question.
Still
How do we
may not
afford it?
be. Still might not be.
Right, I mean, I think. So I think we've already, now on the public safety.
Yeah.
When we talked to the police chief, he wanted a $4,800 e-bike,
correct.
which sounded like it might be cost effective. If they're riding around in an e-bike rather than a car.
But they're not gonna eliminate a car for sure. this will be a plus.
That's not how math works.
Yeah, exactly.
So we want to ignore the e-bud that we talked about?
In my mind,
So we're all priority was added after the vote, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's what the Chief Fitzgerald talked about. He thought it was in the book and it had been deleted.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
Okay.
I wrote it, in, you wrote it, I wrote it in when we talked about it.
Right. Okay, so we don't include it. Okay. Then we have the harbor and no wake buoys.
Yeah.
That I think Brian talked about.
He did.
Yeah,
Now we get to the water department.
I don't get it.
And I'm confused, he probably told us. But the 2 million for water plant upgrades and PFAs,
that's, yes.
Mhm.
I thought that was, I thought the PFAS stuff was relative to design.
but it wasn't 2 million.
No.
Or was it? Is that designed for PFAS, the 2 million?
Testing, design.
It's, most of that is for PFAS design work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Water pipe replacements at 2 million,
Mhm.
which is more than we spent in prior years.
So, yeah, this is, basically Pleasant Street, right?
I think he said Pleasant Street, maybe the beginning of Old Essex, and maybe Pleasant Street Extension if they have enough money.
Correct, correct.
We have from that grant for, it's like,
Grant.
there's a grant to put the water and sewer up to, Atwater Ave, up Mill Street.
No, not, that's 3.5 million.
Yeah, that grant. So that works, gonna be done too.
That's, yeah, that's separate. That's not on this.
It's separate, but it's the same.
Well-
That's what I'm saying.
No, but CST is gonna be overseeing that. That's a CST project.
Yeah, but it's on public right. It's on Mill Street.
Yeah, but,
Going under 128, there's gonna be all kinds of stuff.
right, but they're doing that. We just had to be the ones to get the grant. Otherwise, they would have had to pay for it themselves.
So I think Chuck and Nate are gonna get to work.
It'll certainly involve some of their time and effort, yes. Just to make sure it's being done. It needs to be done to our specs and that sort of thing.
But I think they were expecting to do that in 2024, right?
But they're hoping to do that this summer.
Yeah, so it's almost like they're doing it in fiscal year 24, not 25. Yeah. Water truck replacement, water enterprise funds, and then the water meter replacement, 1.5 million. And that, the water meter replacement, whether or not it's bonded, will vary based on the decision made by the select board regarding the flat fee.
That's
Or
right.
would that be used to repay the bonds?
Well, it would be used to repay the bond, yes.
Okay,
That's, I think. we're-
okay. And then 4.1 million for sewer plant upgrades.
Yep.
And I think that we've supported because
It's the one that's right, one throwing.
Yeah, of priorities, strikes me, that's a very high.
okay.
I was gonna say more water than all those water meters. Well,
What's your favorite?
but
So I guess that's where we're coming down with on the capital budget. We have a question on whether road resurfacing can be reduced for that additional chapter 90 funds.
Right,
And I think we're assuming that the Mason building would be 1 million. Rather than 750.
And I need to just follow up on the water main work in terms of any leftover dollars.
Right, to see whether that can be reduced.
Right,
And then I think, given that information and the fact that we're willing to see a 3% tax increase and to spend down the reserves to the 8% and take only 500,000 out of stabilization for OPEB. The question is how do the numbers play out, and is there a way to lower the amount of the bond?
Exactly.
okay. All
Very
right,
well put.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And very well put, this observation.
oh, also the ambulance thing,
Right.
whether part of the ambulance is paid from reappropriation,
right. Yep,
from the
that's-
ladder truck.
yep. That was
Okay.
the problem.
So if we can have that stuff. By the 13th.
Yep, we'll work on that.
And then. On the 6th, we have the schools, and we're gonna try to do other budgets that we haven't passed. Little piddly stuff.
Right.
The school next week.
Yep. And we have the information on the health insurance, right? You sent that 5.25% increase,
Right, so that's a savings that we'll realize.
but the pension number that Andrew is carrying is higher than what you had given us.
Yes,
Okay, so her number's right.
correct.
Okay,
We got a correction on that from them.
okay. So if she can adjust the health insurance number down too, and doing all these numbers to see where we come out.
Right. Yes, we can provide an update based on all the votes you've taken to date, and we'll do some additional homework on this capital.
Yeah, and the other thing we were waiting for, Greg, is the new contract for animal control.
Oh, okay.
Put that on hold because we were supposedly getting a new number.
Yeah, I need to follow up on that. I'm forgetting where that stands.
Okay. And we were waiting for additional information on rubbish collection.
Remind me what that was about?
So what I was gonna ask it, I remind you about specific.
I don't have, again, I'm
Part
sorry.
of it was Black Earth. Because I think the question was their cost gonna go down because they were gonna be using the compost site longer?
Yeah, there may be a reduction. So on the agenda for next week with the select board is Black Earth request to utilize the old landfill area more extensively than originally proposed. So there may be some negotiating about
Okay.
what that's worth. Whether we can get some additional services or whether we can reduce the cost of some of our existing service.
And then I think on the sanitation. We were waiting to find out if revenue could be higher for increase in the bags fee or something, right?
Oh, yes, yep.
I think we received the information on the debt service, so I think we can do that on 3/6. And then, Andrea said that we have to take a vote on opioid funds of
Oh, yes, yeah, it's a small amount, but yeah,
free cash to a special revenue account.
yes.
That's OPEB funds, you know?
No,
No, this is, we're getting some settlement monies from the whole national opioid settlements. It's not a lot of money, but we just have to have official votes on it to be able to expend it.
we got it last year, so it had to go into the free cash, and the state hadn't done what they needed to do to allow us to create a special revenue account,
Right,
and we need to move it in there and we'll just spend it.
okay.
Yeah.
All around is it?
9,000.
Yes, not. And debt service we're doing next week?
Yeah, let's do debt service next week. And we should be able to do the employee benefits, insurance and pension next week.
Yes,
We have that information now.
Yeah.
And no one I wish we did, okay.
Can I ask a question about next week's?
Mhm.
What is the status of the school budget at this point in terms of Essex? I know they've come back and reduced. Where is Essex? Where is the thinking on Essex at this point? Do we know?
Well, what I read in the paper that the town administrator
Okay,
said
I read too.
is that they felt they'd be okay this year.
Okay, I read the paper. I didn't know if it had been more official than the newspaper. That's our source, I guess.
Good Lord, it is. Sure.
So the big issue apparently is not a big issue this year.
Apparently.
But
That's
maybe
after all.
next year it will be.
The issue.
Question is still enough.
What they're gonna do with the elementary school. I mean,
Yeah. Okay.
that's so swamps everything else.
Oh, the other thing we were waiting for, Greg, is on the streetlights. We were waiting for Danvers rate.
waiting for,
Hourly- Danvers is doing the maintenance on our lights,
yes,
and we were waiting for their hourly rate information to see
Oh.
whether the amount we were carrying is realistic.
that's right, yes,
We
yeah,
thought it was too high.
right. Yeah, okay.
Okay. And we're gonna drop, and get a vote on this OPEB again, we'll drop that down to 500K from stabilization. Okay,
So with that 500 is, that's all we're bringing out of stabilization, just the 500.
I don't know, I think we have to wait to see the numbers, because I think we're gonna need to use stabilization for some capital item
Okay,
in order to get it down to the level that makes sense if we're dropping the total reserves down to the 8%.
right.
Yeah.
Right, very good,
And we'll let Andrea give us a suggestion on that.
yes.
Because it doesn't make sense for us to try to figure it out. She's got the expertise to do it, and as long as we've established the parameters, she can figure it out better than I can.
We could, going by what we talked about earlier. so
Yeah.
We'd be targeting 750 remaining.
Yeah, that's right, 750.
Right. Which, see, you could do the Mason building for $1 million. Which is another discrete item.
For stabilization is what you're thinking.
Right,
So
yeah.
We give it, throw the balance of 200 for OPEB together with the 300 that we tend to authorize anyway.
Yeah, and kind of see where it comes out.
A million out of stabilization for council region, but would be good.
Yeah,
People wouldn't complain about that. It's good use of money. It's been parked there forever.
not forever.
while.
We started funding it in 2011.
I remember the annual reports writing 1.8 down on a lot of.
Okay. So I think we're in pretty good shape
Yeah.
until the 13th, but I'm not sure we're gonna actually finish the budget till the 21st. We'll see.
Keep going.
What do you think school will take?
Oh, I don't think it will take very long.
Okay, yeah.
I did ask them to have, I asked Teresa Whitman to have some members of the Manchester reps on the school committee explain to us why they selected the middle option rather than the least expensive option. Because when we had the joint meeting with Essex FinCom, we asked them to apply all of the savings from health insurance to reduce the budget. And they pulled out 60,000 for items that they hadn't deemed important enough to put in the original budget, but then when they had extra monies to spend, they decided to spend them. So it makes sense that the Manchester reps on the school committee will just tell us why they did it.
Yes.
I mean, it's not very much money, but
Logic is logic.
I think the Manchester School Committee members should be providing information to the Manchester FinCom as to why they personally voted a certain way. Yeah,
I think Pam mentioned that if they went with the least option, it would mean layoffs down the road.
no,
There was something.
no.
Do you anticipate resistance to getting the Manchester representatives to do exactly?
I don't know. I don't know, but that's what I asked for. I mean, my issue is that every year the information we receive on the school committee budget is from the school district. It's not from the school committee. And the school committee is the one responsible for presenting it to the towns. And the district recommended a lower budget than what they approved. So that was, I don't have an issue with it. I mean, it's,
Well, they gave options.
What's
right?
the
They gave 3 options.
right, and they picked the middle one, which wasn't much more, but still explain to us why you picked it. That's, you know, I think the school committee needs to be accountable.
They're
For what
the
they're
the
doing.
ones that we do. I mean, in fact, Pam and Avi's successor worked for the school committee
Right,
effectively, so.
Yeah, right.
You know, it just happens that Avi and Pam are the knowledge base, and they've always been very good here.
Right.
And the school committee just sort of rubber stamps they do.
Yeah.
But I think the last couple of years have taught us that power shift has changed
yeah,
and the responsibility has changed.
and Pam will be here.
Yeah.
You know, but I don't see it at this point as particularly controversial, but I just think that, you know, there was one year when the school committee refused to come see us.
Yeah, we weren't good friends for a little while.
Right,
That took a lot of straightening out.
because we were complaining about the increases to Manchester.
We were in the same boat that Essex was.
Right.
Or similar.
Yeah.
But again, my other, you know, as much as you have that question, I still have the question of like, what happened last year and this year? Last year supposedly we needed to see a 7% increase.
Right.
In the district budget, then this year suddenly.
Forget about it.
2.9 is okay.
Right,
That's a question I definitely want to ask, which is, what do we think the long-term implications of this lower increase are? And is this sustainable? Is this long-term sustainable, or is this a patch to get through to something else down the road? And I'd really like to hear that from them, because
What does it mean for their master plan for school program? Right.
Is there such a plan?
don't know. They do have a plan for staffing changes over the next 3 years. That's one of their reports.
They usually have pretty thorough answers on this kind of stuff, but I suspect they do have, you know, they have strategies and you know, what you see in other districts sometimes is that they're changing their protocols for what's the constituency grade wise at elementary schools versus middle and high schools. Right now it's sixth grade and six and seven are middle school, right?
Right.
6, 7, and 8.
6, 7, and
6, 7, 8.
Yeah,
But other districts have,
fifth grade.
Five
moves
gets
to
moved
middle
around
school.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Sometimes just 7 and 8.
yeah, and they, having had gone through that transition for kids, you know, it's it could be a potentially traumatic time for them, you know, shifting over to the big building.
I think another question worth asking is about school choice.
Yeah.
And I know they're interjecting that really in the top, that 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th, maybe
Right.
7th and 8th, but you know, what happens if 2 years out, there's a change in things? I read in the paper, I think they were looking at 50 or 80. It was, the number surprised,
for this year?
yeah.
No, it's lower than that.
I think it was 50.
I thought it was 52.
Also,
Oh,
It did creep up, but they, as you said, they were targeting,
You know, not like elementary school.
right, later in the,
Later, because then the commitment wasn't as great, because when you let them in that second grade, you got them carrying.
there was a period we had 120.
Yeah,
And they were scattered, they were weighted way down into elementary, middle school, and that took a lot of years to dig out of that hole.
yeah,
And then we've been running about 20 or 30. That's why the 50 crickets just surprised me. I was like, whoa.
There's one more item that I wanted to raise, Greg. And that was a peripheral discussion we had that we didn't really resolve. And that was with respect to project oversight of whether the cost for the project oversight is being included in the projects as capital items rather than a staff position that might be required to oversee them.
Yeah, so Chuck has a memo ready for sort of the cost comparison of the different approaches.
Okay,
We can present that to you at your next meeting, or if you have time, or we can do it on the 13th.
okay. Let's try to aim for 3.6 because that will could impact things.
Yes, yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, so 3.6 is DPW project staff. I hope he'll be short-winded though.
Yes, we'll give you the memo ahead of time so you can have it.
Okay,
So yes, it doesn't need to be a long discussion.
right. Okay,
That was not next week, the week after.
and that's next week, 3.6.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because 3.13 is when we're trying to complete everything, because the report needs to be done by 3/27. So we need numbers. And she can't really do the final stuff for capital if she doesn't know whether this stuff will be in operating or capital.
Right.
That's where my brain is coming from.
Yep. That comes right place.
Okay. So do we have any minutes to approve? January
No.
10th.
Not yet. They're coming though.
Okay, we've already talked about the next meeting. Anything else people would like to raise that wasn't on the agenda? So I have a motion to adjourn.
second.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Thank you. Ended precisely on time.
Not there.
What do you know?
Here's what nicely done.
All right.
Job in the lunch stuff.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. I hope
Thank you,
everything's
Greg.
going okay for you down there.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah, actually, we had good news today. She doesn't need surgery, so that was,
Oh, good.
that was a huge relief. Hard to imagine
What
how
is
they
she,
would,
3?
yeah, she's 3, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Almost, she'll be 3 in another month, but,
Oh, not quite. How did she do it? How did she,
took
what
a,
happened? How'd she?
she took a
maybe-
hard tumble off a play structure and just landed wrong on her ankle and broke the ankle, so.
If it's any consolation, we had a broken femur at age 2.5, 3, that involved a cast that became very entertaining. And I will say, we were completely freaked out by the whole thing. And the
Yeah.
orthopedic guy was like, no, we see the solids. Everybody thinks kids bounce, they don't.
Yeah.
And the repairs are amazing, so
Yeah, good to know.
it doesn't make it any easier.
Well, but, you know, it helps to know. I'll pass it on to my son because they could use a little reassurance. All right, folks. Good night.
Thanks, Greg.
See ya.
For the,
Florida.
Florida.
Yeah, man, you didn't mind. Just let me know.
I don't know.
It's good.
Let's just swing back up.
Yeah, oh, yeah. That's not too bad. BC's talking about it like it's the wither, the winter chill. I'm not nothing, you know, it's like just 28. Yeah.
I didn't
You wanna sell
realize.
Batteries, and they fill your bathtub.